Let's kick it off. First of all, welcome to Survive to Thrive number 13. My name is Nick Miller. I'm the Executive Director at the Venture College, which is a program in the College of Innovation and Design at Boise State that seeks to help students launch their ventures beyond the classroom. And we, when the pandemic hit in March, April, we partnered with Trailhead and TM at Trailhead to start delivering this program, as well as a few others, in an effort to sustain the community that has really started to grow and get a lot of traction in Boise around startups. And so we've been having a great time talking to some of our community's leading entrepreneurs, as well as other service providers. And we've started to substitute this for all the times that we would be at Trailhead or elsewhere and have the opportunity to run into one another and learn about each other's businesses and ideas. And we're thrilled today to have Trillitye Paullin with Free to Feed and Shannon Bloemker. I hope I'm saying that correct, Shannon. With Crave. And both of these companies have been in the works for quite some time, but have launched really in a big way during this pandemic. And it's something that I think will be a unique discussion that we'll be able to hear what that has been like, some of the challenges, potentially some of the advantages of doing that during this time. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Maybe to kick it off, I will ask each of you to introduce yourself, Shannon and Trill, and then we can get the questions started with TM. And just a reminder to those in the audience, we'll take your questions in the chat, so feel free to post them there, and then TM and I will get them to our panelists. So maybe let's start with Trill.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And I want to say first, thank you for this platform. I really enjoyed the Survive to Thrive series. So I appreciate wholeheartedly being a part of it now. My name is Trillitye Paullin. I am a molecular biologist and I am the founder of Free to Feed. Free to Feed is creating a test strip to allow moms to test their breast milk for the presence of allergens at home.
All right, Shannon, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and Crave?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Shannon Bloemker, and I'm the head of strategy for Crave Delivery. We launched on June 1st. We are loosely termed a ghost kitchen. So we have a commercial kitchen facility where we hold 16 restaurants, and it's exclusively for delivery. And so that's kind of us in a nutshell. We're super excited to be part of this. Thank you for having us, TM and Nick, and happy to answer any questions that we can about it. I could go on and on, but I'll wait and see what what questions you have.
Why don't I unmute myself first? Why don't I start with Trill and have you give us a little bit of a status update with respect to Free to Feed, where you are, and sort of what the next couple of months have in store for you. I want to say that, I've been watching you and your venture, your startup, for quite some time. I know you've completed the Mission 43 program. You won the Idaho Entrepreneurial Challenge. Trailhead hosted you at Boise Pitch Night for a pitch. You went on and took second place at Boise Startup Week. So I'm listing all these milestones of success, but if you can tell us, throughout that journey, where are you now and where are you headed next?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we are super excited to have been awarded the iGEM grant. So the Idaho Global Entrepreneurial Mission Grant, which is super exciting. We are partnering with the University of Idaho, Dr. McGuire and Dr. McGuire, in their lab. And so they are kicking off very shortly a really phenomenal research study to do third-party validation of our product. And I'm super excited just to be working with literally the subject matter experts in lactation and infant nutrition, which is amazing. And that's really been like a year in the works. So while, you were mentioning all of these other things that were happening, iGEM and that partnership and prepping for it was really in the background of all of that. So super excited to have been awarded that particular grant. In addition, Free to Feed was recently accepted into the cohort for Tampa Bay Wave Accelerator. So this is their Tech Diversity Accelerator. And so very excited. We kicked off last week, and the goal being over the next 90 days to really dig into the company and learn all of the things that, obviously as a molecular biologist don't come naturally originally to me as an entrepreneur now. And so I'm excited to dig in on that and excited about their program. And from there, goal is to finish out our fundraise and then hit the market. So very excited.
Very exciting. Couple of questions on what you just said. Tell me a little bit about the fundraise, when you expect to close that. And why don't we start with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are projecting really with today's world, if you will. We're trying to be flexible with our expectations on close for the fundraise. I am doing demo day with Tampa Bay Wave in September. So the goal is really to get as much of it done prior to that and utilize their networking and their investors leading up to that, but have September as the final, clinch if needed, if we haven't reached it then.
Makes sense. So it sounds like you kind of run those two in parallel. Is on demo day for the accelerator, is there an equity option? Is that similar to the Y Combinator's demo day, or is it different?
It's different. So for Tampa Bay Wave, they don't do the same exact program as Y Combinator. They are similar in many aspects without the specific equity.
I gotcha. And before I move on to Shannon, startups in your vertical, they're typically hampered by, the regulatory environment, if you will. You're not building software that someone can use to purchase something with, right? It's deeper than that. And so, you said this partnership with the university, or I shouldn't say partnership with the university, the iGEM grant has sort of been in the background for a year. Tell us a little bit about the longer life cycle of the kind of product that you're developing, and also maybe highlight this partnership with the university. It's one of the first ones that I've heard where a Idaho-based university, digs in deep with a startup via the iGEM grant. So I'm pretty interested in that.
Yeah, for sure. So as far as the first part of the question, the FDA piece, right? So we are beholden to specific FDA regulations, but the interesting piece is because this is informational only and it's external use, right? We're not injecting anything, we're not taking anything, and it is an informational tool for moms. It is considered what's called a 510K exempt, so class 1 exempt product, which essentially means that we will meet with the FDA, we'll explain what we're doing, we'll file all of the documentation, pay for the filings, of course, because Uncle Sam will get his chunk as well. And then from there, we don't actually have to have FDA approval. So there isn't any version of like official clinical trials or anything like that that's necessary, which will significantly speed up our life cycle compared to like an official diagnostic that would be like embedded into the body, for example. On the other question, as far as iGEM and the partnership, it's really interesting because it's incredibly helpful in that Doctors McGuire, if that's the right way to say it, are subject matter experts in biomolecular aspects of lactation. And so what will be really important here is that third-party validation and publications, because since my product is in the biotech space and will need to have the support of all kinds of medical professionals. So from pediatricians to allergists to GI specialists, lactation consultants, midwives, there's a lot of people that are involved and touch this space. And so with that, we want to make sure that we not only have a third-party validation, but that it's published. And so that's where U of I has a huge piece, not only to walk us through that, but then also to have these publications to revert back to say, here's the actual science, here's the actual data. And the interesting piece is that a large portion of that study is less so just the third-party validation where we're saying like, look, this is the product and the product works, but also to really run home the actual science and data behind this topic, because there's a lot of misinformation spread about ingesting a protein to when it ends up in your breast milk to when it's clear. So we're just kind of like clearing the air there as well, which is super important in the research side.
Sounds like there's a huge educational component to your early adapters as well. And I promise I will turn it over to Shannon, but one more for you. So the publication, the science, and having, the third-party validation, as you said, is going to help speed up, on top of not being held to a class 2 or 3, 510K from the FDA. So are you basically saying the state of Idaho, gave you a big shot in the arm and is empowering your startup with these 2 outstanding PhD subject matter experts backed by a lab, right?
110%. So Idaho Chamber of Commerce, by awarding University of Idaho and Free to Feed this grant, has significantly springboarded the company and will be a huge help in increasing our trajectory and getting us to market faster.
Music to my ears when I see, the state of Idaho step up and help startups in the ecosystem. I just applaud them, and thank you for that. That's great. Good to hear. And as promised, let me turn it over to Shannon. Shannon, you and I have spoke at length before.
Yes.
Tell me, leading up to COVID, I know Crave delivery was in the works. So kind of take us through leading up to COVID and then what the COVID did in terms of your launch.
Absolutely. So we started last May with a seed investment from Stage.0, which is a Boise-based venture fund. So May, we had collected a team of experts and joined with the founders and really started looking into what we could do to bring food delivery to Boise specifically. And there were a couple of different models we looked at, and the one that we really liked the most was the one that we're launching with right now, which is gathering all of these restaurants and really making them partners and bringing them into one facility that is vertically integrated so that everything is contained in one space. We don't have any third party people coming coming into the facility or doing delivery. So we have the kitchens, the restaurants come in, they make all the food. We have quality control people, we have facility packaging people, and then we have employee driver fleet, and then our own cars that do the whole delivery. So that was the model that we wanted to launch with. So we needed to find a site, we needed to build a building, we needed to hire people, we needed to build the technology to support the whole initiative. As you can imagine, everything from the consumer app to how the kitchens get run, to all the payment processing, to the drivers, there's just a lot to unpack there. So we were going, gangbusters in that direction. Everything was great. Then when COVID happened, we said, well, everybody's ordering in, everybody has delivery. The restaurants themselves were suffering. A lot of our restaurant partners are from around the country. And, this was a really tricky time for them. So it was something that we all sat around and said, virtually, and said, well, what can we do? How can we embrace this? How can we accelerate our launch? And that's what we did. So we found a temporary facility because ours was still under construction. We brought in 4 of our best partners that were just going to focus on dinners, particularly family-based shareable meals, and come together as quick as possible. And we finagled it and pulled it off. And the goal was really to be here and be present when people were ordering, and to really help bolster some of the economic hit that had happened to these restaurant partners. So I think we were able to handle both of those things. I'm so grateful that Boise was comfortable enough to be able to open up in May, but still there's quite a number of people who have gotten used to the idea of ordering in and are still finding it challenging to put dinner on the table when you're trying to homeschool kids and also do your own job. And still some people not super comfortable with going out yet, limited seating for a lot of the restaurants. So for a lot of reasons, we're really glad that we were able to come to market quicker. So that was kind of our unique situation.
Well, it sounds like quite the undertaking. So you have customers. Obviously, you need to manage that channel and that front end. You have partners, and I know you intentionally call them partners, and I want to dig into that a little bit, as opposed to customers again on the restaurant side.
Yeah.
And then you have the tech piece, and as if all that isn't enough, you still got to build operations and actually make the food and get it to the people and manage the last mile. And as I'm rattling off all these this huge to-do list, tell us how is it going? How did the accelerated launch, I should say, how did it go?
It was great. It was, all hands on deck. You can imagine everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and we were still able to make it look like everything was perfect and everything's working in the right direction. We've been super excited by the response from Boise. I mean, thousands of people have signed up for our mailing list and come through and really been excited about this. From corporations have looked to partner with us and find ways to accelerate it. People are really excited that we've come to Boise specifically. As you guys know very well, in the startup space, a lot of times startups will focus on the big metro regions, and we had a different business model. We really thought that that places like Boise had people who really do love food and wanted to have this same kind of model, and that we could make that work economically, particularly because of the demographic, the way everything is distributed. We were able to find a facility that had a 20 to 25 minute drive radius, so we could reach the bulk of the people that we considered our target audience. So for a lot of reasons, that was great. And we've been super excited by the reception. People love it. People are generous with reviews. They're patient with us when the app needs to be updated, and I can't say enough great things about it. So I'm really, really super happy about that. And we're still obviously moving toward opening up our larger facility at 10 Mile Crossing should be in September. It depends who you ask, whether you ask our contractor or whether you ask our founders. But right around the early fall, we're expecting to move in there, and we're going to be able to bring a lot more of our restaurant partners along with us at that point. So we're very excited. We have a lot of customers who have really reached out to us and said, we love what you're doing. We love the restaurants that you've brought here, but we can't wait for more. So I think that's a great validation of the model, at least from our standpoint.
Well, it sounds like great reception from the community, also on the customer side and partner side. I've actually worked with a few companies that are sort of in your space, not exactly, but that touch the last mile. And the startups that I've worked with, they typically were really heavy on delegating and outsourcing. In other words, they wanted to focus on the one thing that was their core competency, and everything else was outsourced, delegated, or partnered. Now, when you do that, you also, put at risk quality control, the vertical integration. And so, that's right out of the gate sets Crave apart for me from other food delivery services. Can you speak to that? And especially as that relates to that partner model with the restaurants, as I understand that the people who are cooking the food in your facility are they restaurant employees, or are they your employees?
They're restaurant employees. So I think that is the big differentiator. So obviously people are completely familiar with things like Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub, and the critical difference between those and Crave is that not only are we making the delivery process more efficient by having these kitchens be all co-located in a place that was designed for delivery, but we recognized that there were high quality restaurant groups and chefs that didn't feel like handing off these things that they had worked so hard and labored to create to somebody who was not incentivized to deliver it well, may or may not show up, might eat your French fries on the way. That was a shocking thing I learned actually in a study, that 28% of drivers for DoorDash admitted to eating the food. 28%. I was like, wow. So those were just a lot of reasons that some of these higher quality restaurants just chose to not do third-party delivery at all. So that meant that there's a gap in the market between consumers who want to eat that high quality food and don't want to just order, McDonald's or pizza every night, and the restaurants that want to be able to still be able to provide this service. So having them come in, they train their own employees, they hire their own employees, they run their own kitchen. We have video for them to be able to remotely monitor it. A lot of times they'll do a share back and forth. So had it not been the midst of a pandemic, they would have had some of the employees travel back to Seattle, San Francisco, wherever the restaurant is based, and meet that team, really get steeped in that culture. We've had them do some traveling back and forth. And so it'll work differently for different restaurant partners, but by and large, this is like what they control. And then we have on-site people to help support them in that. So, you know, whether it's HR things or, you know, supply chain things that they need help and support with, that's what our facility does. And then our facility also, the employees that are Crave employees are the people who do all the packaging. So there's this big conveyor system that runs down the center of the kitchen. People put all of their, you know, restaurant foods on it, and then we package it all up into Crave packaging. So each of the kitchens will produce something, which is actually another element that's a differentiator for us, is that because they're all co-located in one space, you can order some sushi and a pizza and have it all in one order. And that's not something that you can do right now with the third-party delivery apps, because they're all, you know, based on where they've gotten the food from the restaurant.
I fully admit I'm that dad that goes to 2 or 3 different restaurants, order simultaneously, and then wait patiently in front of the door to go home. So yeah, we tried Crave and we did that. We got a little bit of everything. It was great. The delivery time was great. The food tasted great. You know, as I was sitting there, you talk about the packaging, the branding was very Crave heavy. And then the box itself had, you know, a note or a sticker from the restaurant. So as I was eating, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm one of these higher end restaurants, sure, this is a whole new vertical, you know, a vertical that I didn't want to touch before, which was delivery, because it could degrade the quality and the perception of my brand.
Right.
Now you're enable them to do that. Is there also, you know, from a restaurant's perspective, if I'm one of these, you know, there's this high-end restaurant in Seattle and I kind of want to test the market in Boise, I'm not quite sure if I want to set up a brick and mortar. In other words, is Crave Delivery also a stepping stone for some of these partners to figure out and research whether setting up brick and mortar is feasible?
I mean, it might be. It's not something that we're going out with as a value proposition, but you know, I would have said before COVID, that was definitely an entrant into some of the conversations that we were having. I think now restaurants have really seen the vulnerability of brick and mortar businesses. Not that we're going to have repeated pandemics, but when you look at partnering with somebody like Crave and having this virtual kitchen and still being able to have you know, much higher margins on their revenue, and really create a business model where you can still do what you love, which is creating great food for consumers to enjoy without all of the overhead. I think a lot of them might have entered into it saying, hey, let's test whether Boise or Salt Lake or any of the other expansion destinations are going to be places where I want to open my new restaurant. But it's a big undertaking. I mean, it's really, really expensive to open a restaurant. You can ask any of them, they'll tell you that's the first thing that concerns them. So audience validation of your model isn't always the biggest driving force for whether or not they decide to do something, because they'll usually say, well, if Seattle loves it, I'm sure there's other places that will love it as well. So it might be. I think that's definitely still part of the discussion, and we're open to whatever is working for them. I mean, certainly if they are happy with that and they're excited and they want to bring something like that here, then that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, and I think strategically it probably wouldn't cannibalize the delivery anyway, since that's still something they wouldn't want to get into and delegate. You know, yeah. Your model is interesting in the sense you're blending the what you outsource versus what you do in house really well on paper so far, from what I can tell. And so, you know, if I'm a restaurant owner, sort of walk me through the revenue model, if you will, and then you don't have to divulge everything. I'm just curious as to, you said they have an opportunity to earn higher margins.
Right. So they're paying rent essentially for the kitchen that they're operating, and they're not making their full menu just because there's not really a reason to. They're sort of making their best dishes, or at least that's what they've that we've thought about, right? So they're going to come and they're going to do the 10 best things that they can crush, right? So if you've got an Austin barbecue place, or you've got this amazing seafood place from Seattle, they'll just come and do those 10 dishes. So the whole goal of this is, how do you optimize for that? How many employees do I need in order to do it? Am I open for lunch or just dinner? Or am I doing late night? And it's really going to depend on each restaurant concept, what works for them. So the technology and the feedback that we have for them on who's buying what, who's enjoying what, where the demand is really giving them information that they don't always have at their fingertips in their regular restaurant, because other factors will come into play. So the goal is then that they can do what they do as efficiently as possible and be able to kind of fine tune it so that they're just doing what they're doing. If you have a restaurant and you're open for dinner, well, what if Mondays, there's really not a lot of people, but you still have to be open for the 2 that might come in at 8 o'clock because you're open from 5 to 10. So with something like Crave, they can begin to see what the patterns are of those kind of demand and ordering, and maybe they don't send anybody in, and then it's just, those items are turned off for the night. So It doesn't really compromise the entire restaurant, and they're still not having to pay those employees or buy all of that food. So the goal is really to make it a much higher margin business than a restaurant typically is, because it just doesn't have all of that overhead. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. Yeah.
So they might still open their brick and mortar business. So we actually had one restaurant partner who is looking at closing down all of his brick and mortar businesses. He was looking at it even before COVID, and now he says, this is the wave of the future. This is what I want to be. And there's tons of studies that really talk about how the changing behaviors in society are really increasing the amount of deliveries for food and all kinds of services, obviously. But people working from home now, recognizing that they might be able to continue to work from home, for longer periods of time, or at least split their time. Food delivery is not going away. It's projected to grow by, I want to say 35% a year over the next 10 years. UBS did a study on it. And, we're just hoping to be a differentiator, give people different options and expect better from delivery, because we're holding everything in-house. So that's the goal.
Well, I think if you were to put a menu in the chat, you might have about 12 here. I'm getting hungry just
go to
listening.
the website.
Trill, I wanted to circle back to you on a question. You mentioned the Tampa Bay Accelerator that you were accepted into. One, can you just share a little bit about that? And then 2, tell us about kind of how that has fit into your life cycle as a company. What made you think, okay, it's time for an accelerator? What milestones did you hit? And what are the outcomes that you're hoping for as you seek to complete that program?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Nick. So the Tampa Bay Wave Tech Diversity Accelerator, they accepted 15 companies in this cohort. And the main goal is providing an accelerator platform for those who are majority owned by minority founded companies, if you will. So anything from demographics to women founded, people of color, the LGBTQ community. So really trying to hone in on founders who can use extra help, essentially. And so myself being a female veteran founder, I was incredibly honored to be joining this cohort. The cohort is absolutely amazing. And I will say that out of all of 15 companies, Free to Feed is the earliest stage, or pretty close to the earliest stage company out of all of the companies that were accepted. So incredibly honored to also kind of hold that, I don't know if I would call it an accolade or not, but to also, be in it as early as we are, because for me, in order to apply, I wanted to, one, feel that I had a full understanding of my business and all of the aspects of the company prior to trying to start to apply to accelerators on more of a national type stage. And so what that looked like for me was really taking advantage of and capitalizing on the local opportunities. So as Tia mentioned, I have done several events with Trailhead, also with the Venture College M43. And so really getting all that foundational piece that I needed first before I felt comfortable kind of putting my company out there on more of a larger scale stage to say, okay, I'm ready to push out of my current region, especially in the midst of a fundraise, right? So how do I get out of my comfort zone and get out of the local area to spread the word about the company and get the additional help and additional mentorship that I need. And that's the interesting piece about bringing a biotech startup to the Treasure Valley, right? So is that being able to tap in not only to the local subject matter experts, but also, kind of drawing in the subject matter experts as well to the area. And I think that that's where the Tampa Bay Accelerator will come in. I actually have my PhD from University of South Florida. So I am very well versed in Tampa area. My husband's from Tampa or that area. And so was very excited to have that partnership and, to go and do the accelerator in Tampa, because it's also opening a lot of doors for me as far as the university is concerned. And, being able to look more so at on the research side, since we mentioned a little bit about the research, how do we integrate additional demographics into our research so that we make sure that we're getting a really good picture of all of the women involved in this issue as opposed to, just this area. So this has been the kind of turning point for me to expand out, if you will.
Yeah, maybe just to pull on that thread a little bit, you're expanding your research to include different demographics and kind of get a bigger picture. Can you tell us a little bit about who your target consumer is and what's the audience that you're after?
Absolutely. So there are definitely different customer segments when it comes to breastfeeding and food intolerance. The main customer segment is going to be those moms who are breastfeeding, who are experiencing any form of food intolerance symptoms. So everything from colic to rash, all the way up to anaphylactic shock. There's this whole crazy range of potential intolerance and allergy symptoms that babies can experience. And the current rate right now is about 25% of parents report some sort of food intolerance with their infant, which is pretty intense considering the fact that 20 years ago, it was about 10% of parents reported some sort of food intolerance. So that's the main focus is, that mom that is, or those parents that is experiencing specific symptoms that could be indicative of food intolerance so that we can walk them through that. One, tell them exactly what is in their breast milk. Because unfortunately, not every protein that you ingest ends up in your breast milk. It all depends on a number of things. And that's where, we're tying in those additional demographics. It is definitely going to be the case that, a breastfeeding mom in Boise, Idaho is going to experience different food choices and different even microbiomes than a mom that lives in Tampa, Florida, and what she eats and what her microbiome looks like as far as how well she's able to break down these proteins and if and when they enter her breast milk and for how long. So it's super important, and it's not in any of the research thus far to actually go out and say, okay, we need to look at these different demographics, what is happening for these different women and why. And then the other piece of that is making sure then that we're able to serve all of those women. So this is a global issue. And the first part of that is really understanding, at least in the United States, what the nuances are. Beyond that mom, there's going to be parents who want to introduce allergens early and often. So we know that peanut and egg has been shown that if you introduce early and often, it can reduce their chances of having that allergen. And a lot of moms, especially those who are more holistic and natural, will want to introduce through their breasts. They will not want to introduce through a synthetic powder or something of that accord. It's kind of hard also to just, give a baby a spoonful of peanut butter. And And then in addition to that, there are segments such as donor banks. So for those parents who adopt or cannot breastfeed for some reason and receive donated breast milk, if baby has any kind of food intolerance problem, that's done, right? Because there's no way to know what mom ate prior to donating her breast milk. Whereas if we were able to provide that service for donation banks, then they would be able to say for sure, like, yep, this particular milk is dairy-free, so it's safe for your baby. And those are just some of the big examples of where this will be used.
Yeah.
So I heard that, I heard a spoonful of peanut butter. Shannon, if that ends up on your menu, I think Trill has rights to that and some kind of revenue share. But Trill, help the audience and myself appreciate the pain points that breastfeeding women today are going through to solve the same problem that you're attempting to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can speak to this from a personal experience. And that's, why I'm here, is this perfect storm of my background plus my personal experience. And typically what happens is mom will go to the pediatrician and there's some sort of food intolerance symptom, but it's by itself, right? So there's colic, for example. And parents will typically be told, yep, babies cry, good luck, and sent home at that point. And so you take this baby home and you're like, can I take it back? Can I get a refund? It never stops crying. What is happening? And commonly what will happen then is there'll be a secondary symptom and maybe even a tertiary. So you have like kind of this buildup of symptoms as mom's continuing to eat her regular diet, because why wouldn't she? So she's eating her regular diet. She's continuing to see this buildup of symptoms. And then there's kind of typically a breaking point, right? Where parents are just like, no, this can't be normal. There's a rash, there's blood in their stool, or they just haven't quit crying for the last 72 hours. Please help us. And for every parent, unfortunately, it's a completely different journey, right? So each parent kind of has this different nuance issues that they deal with. But then essentially what mom's told is like, yep, your breast milk's killing your baby. Your breast milk is poisoning your baby in some way, shape, or form. But we can't tell you how. We don't know why, and we don't know how or what you can do about it, really. So a lot of times mom will be told, try removing dairy, and maybe that'll make it better. And so then she's sent home and she's rifling through her cupboard, like, why does everything have dairy in it? And trying to remove that from her diet when it might not be dairy. It could very easily be something else. And there's no way for her to know what's actually in her milk. And so for me, I originally started Free to Feed as just a content location, right? I went through this with both of my babies. And as I was breastfeeding my second child, I was just awestruck by the fact that there wasn't anything translating the actual science into data for parents, actual information for parents. And so then as I started going through this, while the content is wonderful and definitely has helped thousands of parents, it's not an actual solution, right? So what's a real solution? And for the hundreds of moms that I've spoken to personally, that is being able to just simply know that, okay, I think I've removed dairy, but I still see these symptoms. Why do I see these symptoms? Either because baby's not actually allergic to dairy, or because you didn't actually remove all of the dairy because there's a hidden dairy in your birth control, for crying out loud. And you have no idea that you're continuing to consume something and you're continuing to have this issue. So with that being said, the other big problem that parents face is that infants can't be effectively tested to determine what it is they're allergic to. So that's the huge mystery here is I don't know what Junior is reacting to because none of the tests are really effective until they're 6 to 12 months old or even older. And a lot of the issues that plague infants aren't IgE. They're non-IgE, which is a different immune response and can't be tested through typical methods. So yeah, there's a lot there to uncover. And I would say that that's a big part of my learning curve has been how do I effectively communicate that to other people, that there's so much there to unpack.
I'm much to unpack. I'm still processing what you said.
Case in point.
Yeah.
Shannon, to circle back to you, we heard from Trill about her experience so far with the Tampa Bay Accelerator and where that is headed. Has Crave gone through a similar program, incubator, accelerator? And if so, can you tell us about that experience?
We did not. I think one of the things that that Crave did differently than other startups that I've been a part in, and I've had my own startup and sold that a few years ago, and I have helped a number of other startups get off the ground. I think what's different about Crave is that they brought together people with experienced backgrounds in startups. And also having Stage.0, this backer for us, be their whole business model was to not invest in a ton of different companies. They only invest in 10 for the whole life of the fund, and they commit to shepherding you through the whole process and taking you all the way to your A round successfully. So we didn't go through any kind of an accelerator program, but they were incredibly instrumental in helping. So when we encountered COVID and said, we need to shift something so that we can take advantage of this shelter in place and everybody's sort of accelerating delivery and wanting to bring in this new business model. They connected us with some local entrepreneurs and investors to help us get the funding we needed to do this life thing. Because you can imagine, like, all of the funding was all channeled toward this fall facility, and everything was going that direction. So when you just want to, shift everything all of a sudden and turn it upside down, well, okay, you're going to need some capital to be able to do that. And so they were really instrumental in helping us find those people, tell our story, tell what it was that we wanted to be able to accomplish, what the metrics were we were going to judge ourselves by, what the learnings were going to be, how this was going to dovetail with the fall facility, how it was going to help, not help, support, the A round trajectory that we were on. So I guess that's a long way of saying no, we didn't do an accelerator, but we had a lot of people with the kind of experience that I think you gain when you go through an accelerator program. So we've had some accelerators talk to us, and we just never really felt like that was something that we needed because we had a team of experienced founders. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Serial entrepreneur and seasoned veterans on the team.
It helps a lot because they've seen all kinds of things. I mean, they've seen, panics. They've seen, do we pivot or do we stay the course? They've seen funding fall through. They've seen, all kinds of things that challenge you as a founder and say, gosh, am I on the right path? Is this the right thing to be doing? Or what do I need right now? It's things that a board can help you with at some point, things that advisors can help you with at some point, but just when you're in the earliest stages of company building and ideation and just kind of getting, thousands of dollars, not millions together, you just don't have those resources. So to be able to rely on people and to be able to have a financial backer that really brought us all that has been pivotal for us.
Shannon, so you didn't go through an accelerator, but this partnership with Stage.0 seems to be in place of, when an early stage company goes to an accelerator, much like Trill, she goes there for reasons A, B, and C. Your reasons might be C, D, and E, but it still sounds like you brought in, you partnered with an external partner. As I understand it, Devin, who is a GP at Stage.0,
right,
also a co-founder at Crave, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
So help us appreciate, Stage.0 is fairly new to Boise. We love having that fund and those guys in our community. They've been great to work with, and they really put community first especially when they work with Trailhead. And we also had PlexTrack on a previous call, another Stage.0 portfolio company. So help us appreciate the value that they bring to the table, and maybe help us understand, day to day, what is it like working with them? Is it more strategic? Is it more tactical? Help us appreciate that side of
yeah.
Stage.
So it's a great question, and it's I hope they're watching because it's a great shout out for them. But having had my own company before and had venture investors that are interested in your idea enough to follow your pitch and write you a check, and then you really don't see them much after that. I've had them give me a template for pro forma financials or a legal NDA template. It's not the kind of strategic decision making help that you really need. And what Stage.0 wants to do, what their value prop is to their invest in, not just to their limited partners, but to the companies that they are proposing to invest in, is that they're along that journey with you. They're hand in hand, and when you have a question, they're there. So it's weekly phone calls, and it's updates when you need them, and it can be nerve-wracking to call your investors and say, hey, I have this issue, I don't know how to answer it. So you don't want to make that phone call, but Stage.0 doesn't make you feel that way. So you do feel like you can go and have this sort of true confession, like, I'm stuck, what else can I do? They will, have you talk with other founders. They'll introduce you to someone else, or they've been in that situation before. They'll talk you through it. They'll help bring in, a specialist if that's what you need. So they have a whole network of venture partners that come together, and, you have a question about your sales model. Okay. I have a guy who's a head of sales at Braintree, he'll come in and really help you with the sales tactics. So I think that's what is a big differentiator in their model. And I think that's why they're the startups that have them as an investor are so grateful for it. I mean, they all say it. We all say it. It's a big differentiator.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. It's what I hear about Stage.0, broadly speaking, from the portfolio companies as well. It really sounds like if it sounds like, and please validate this, if you have a product, you have a business, and you can sort of see a path to an A round, but you don't have the resources, the wherewithal on your team necessarily to get there, a fund or a program like Stage.0's would be, that's something that's going to add value to you getting to the A round.
Absolutely. I mean, and they do milestone-based funding. So they'll commit to a series of funding rounds as long as you hit certain milestones. So it actually de-risks it for Stage.0 as well, to be able to say, okay, well, if you can get a prototype, that unlocks, this additional financing. So it really keeps you on that path. And I think that's very important for new founders, because it's easy to get lost in all of the opportunities that people throw your way. Well, why don't you do this? And, people probably tell you that, Trill, all the time, right? Oh, you should try this, and you should do this. And, oh, this would be really great for X. And you're like, kind of need to stay in this swim lane for a little bit longer, so that I know that I can hit this goal, this milestone, this metric, and get where I need to go. And then I can see, do I have runway bandwidth to get to, the other things out there? I mean, the world is full of possibilities. So it's sometimes hard to stay focused. So I think that's another way that they are helping support their founders, so that they don't have to sit there and worry about where their next check is coming from. They've got that commitment. Or, worried about all of these missed opportunities that they see, and should I be devoting resources that direction? They just, they don't struggle with that. So I think that's a big differentiator as well.
Trill, help us appreciate the same topic, but applied to free to feed. So, I mean, you're a hyper-technical founder, science way above my head. How do you navigate, bringing people on, adding them to your team, filling in those seats where maybe you as a scientist aren't as strong as? Not to say that you aren't, but help us appreciate how you navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, to Shannon's point, I love that. People should all over me all the time. And so having to definitely navigate that. First and foremost, I'm the first person to admit the pieces of my expertise that are not to snuff, if you will, for this company, for a biotech startup. I went to school as a molecular biologist. I specialize in protein analysis for cancer research. So for sure, starting a company or running a company is not where I'm trained. That being said, I have learned a ton for sure over the last year and some change. And 100% all of that has been bringing people on board with me. I would say that one of the biggest pieces has been really looking at who can focus with me, right? So similar to what Shannon mentioned, people will come in and they'll see what you're doing and they're excited, but they're excited about what their piece or what their idea is or their twist to it. And so it's been hard to legitimately say no to people and even say no to potential funds, in that it would significantly change the trajectory of the company and the actual focused goal. And so that's important, and it's hard. That's not fun to do. So a large part of like deciding who comes on board is who's in it for the long haul, because this isn't a quick thing, right? It's been well over a year and I'm not in the market yet. This isn't going to be a fast get rich quick scheme, if you will. So who's in it for the long haul, and then who has the expertise to fill the gaps that I have. And so, for example, a really great example of that would be the opportunity I had of meeting Heather Messenger, not only through Trailhead, but also through venturecapital.org. And so she was a mentor to me and has been now and is now a part of the team because we've been working together for almost a year. And her ability to cover the gaps that I have in regulatory and FDA pathways and bringing product to market is incredibly important, not only for the success of the company, but also for those conversations with investors, right? They want to know, how are you going to make this happen long term? And being a super technical founder isn't the answer to that question. Being a super technical founder makes me a great researcher and I'm a wonderful scientist, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to bring something to market. And I need to surround myself with all those people like Heather and similar individuals who can help me focus and can also take those things off my plate so I can build the product too.
That's huge foresight on your part as such a young founder to recognize that you need to supplement your strengths and weaknesses with other people, and to note your pre-product, right? You haven't built on production scale and you're already thinking through those and navigating that. That's pretty impressive, I have to say.
One final question, as I know we're running short on time here, but in a world that the tech world, the startup community can admittedly be very male centric. Can you share your experience as female founders and just what that looks like in today's world, and any tips or advice that you would have for any female founders that may be listening to this conversation today?
Shannon, do you want to start it off?
Oh, you go right ahead.
Okay. So that's a great question. I would say yes, 100%. I agree, Nick. Being a female founder is not easy. Being a founder in general isn't easy, right? Being a biotech, especially founder, isn't easy. And so the challenges that I face are not only being a woman-founded company, but I'm tackling a woman issue. And so it's kind of double tapping as far as I'm concerned, because not only am I do I face some of the many barriers that women founders do, as far as the significant numbers that we see in the reduction in funding that women-founded companies receive, and like why that's the case. So science digging into like why is that, but also the fact that it's a woman-based problem is also challenging for me, in that a lot of the investors and even advisors that would be really significant to help Free to Feed, they're so far removed from this problem. And so they either have never experienced it, they've never been around it, they're just so far removed. Is this really an issue even? Like, do babies have food allergies? Do people even breastfeed anymore? Doesn't everybody just use formula? So that piece and having to educate that piece has been really instrumental and difficult, and truly, truly difficult. I think that my recommendation for anybody in similar shoes, one would be to, as a woman, leverage your strengths. And for me, that means I have a PhD, And so I have had to learn, and actually through Mission 43 and Venture College, really learn how to leverage that as a talking point and as a qualifier, right? Like, I belong here because I went to school forever. So I'm insane in some level. And so therefore I can be an entrepreneur too. So that, first and foremost, that like qualifying myself as belonging in the room. And then the second piece would be to find the other fellow women founders that can bring you up, right? And that will be helpful because even especially like in my experience as a veteran too, I have found that finding those really strong female leaders as entrepreneurs or as in the military has been instrumental in teaching me not only to like see the things you wouldn't typically see, like see the things that you need to address, but also have somebody in your corner to talk to about it is super important.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those. I think that's really well said, Trill. It's a hard question to answer because there are so many facets that that you encounter on a regular basis. And I think that the thing that I would advise to other women who are looking to start their own company or become, a co-founder or part of a C-suite team for a startup is try to go into the room, into an all-male dominated conversation by recognizing some of the biases that they might have and addressing them right up front. So if you know that this group of people, to use Trill's example, are not seeing your business with the correct lens, address that first and foremost. Don't assume that they're along this journey with you. And then, try to have a direct conversation about what you're doing and how that's differentiating and how that your particular talent is really bringing that into the room. One of the things that that Stage.0 considers really important is a diversity of ideas, right? So you can't always take a very tiny, small founding team and say, oh, we're going to have diversity represented here. I mean, there's 3 people and they're probably, your college roommates. This isn't necessarily something that you can just orchestrate. But take a look at them and recognize where you're going to get diversity of thinking. And a lot of times bringing an opposite sex or somebody else into the conversation is going to be better for problem solving. It's going to be better for ideation. And it's just going to make your team stronger. So, also being able to acknowledge that you're coming into this male dominated space, but you're bringing a diversity of thought and conversation that's really going to be accretive to the whole business. So I commend you for having such great insight. I don't think I had that at your age, but it's really helpful to be able to talk up your strengths, being able to feel confident walking into the room, and then recognize what those biases are. I think there was a study that was talking about why women founders are facing so many challenges with getting venture investing. And some of it is the way that VCs ask questions is not even the way that women often will approach a problem, the way that they have a conversation. But you can do yourself a favor by recognizing that it's a male-dominated environment, or that they might be looking at the questions with a particular lens, or assuming that you are a certain way because you're female, and turn that conversation upside down. So I think the more informed and the more educated that you are about whatever biases might be out there, whether they're perceived or accidental, incidental, or very real, the more that you can control the conversation at that point. So.
Thank you both. I appreciate the candor, and I love the fact that your investors encourage not only diversity but diversity of thought. Those different backgrounds and experiences can inform a product, a company, a team in a way that you can't have a substitute for. So we are out of time, and I just wanted to say thank you to Trill and Shannon for joining us today. It was a really fun conversation. Thank you to TM and the whole team at Trailhead for continuing to partner with the Venture College on this. We're headed into the dog days of summer here with July and August, and we are going to be sending out an updated calendar to everyone that has attended these. We'll probably be putting a little bit of time in between them, a little bit more than the weekly basis we've run them on as everyone's travel, well, at least not too far, but travel schedule fills up a little bit during the summer. So please look out for that. And again, thank you to our panelists, Shannon and Trill with Crave and Free to Feed. And Tim, I don't know if you had anything to add here at the end.
Really just grateful to you and the Venture College. Good luck to these two fabulous startups, both gems of Idaho. One to leave to Florida, but hopefully coming back soon. Hint, hint. Love to have you back. Yeah, best of luck to both of you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, TM, Nick, and Trill. It was lovely being on the panel with you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you all. And if you're available in just a little while, Tampa Bay Wave is officially kicking off, and everyone is invited. If you're wanting, you can jump on any of their platforms, and they're doing their kickoff for all 15 companies.
And if you're hungry for dinner, you can go on Crave Delivery and order.
Yes.
I'm in on both. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, take care. Thanks again.
Thank you.